Hello and welcome back to another edition of SuperCoach Edge, and of course we're talking all things BBL coming out of round 4, and we'll jump into things straight away. If you haven't subscribed to us, if you can do so, that'll be absolutely fantastic. Just click the button below, comments, all that sort of stuff, pop them down below. But as you can see here, my score is 864 coming out of the round. Unfortunately, the last game, as we know, was washed out halfway through, or not even halfway through, but partway through the Sixers innings. So you'll see in a moment when I run through my team, it was kind of capped, unfortunately, due to the fact that Sam's didn't yet have a bowl. So his score was largely capped, and me, like everyone else or most people, would have had the VC turned into the C on Sam's. So that was unfortunate to see. But as you can see, he scored 864, and season rank, I am now back inside the top 1K, now ranked 992nd overall, up 94 spots. So let's have a look at my team and how it fared individually. There we go, and I'll just roll through them very, very quickly. So Philippi, 21. McDermott, he's been out for the past 3 games now, I think. Copped a bit of a niggle. Hopefully he's back this week. Was named in their squad, strangely enough, but didn't make the final team. So potentially 50-50, reading between the lines there. As I said, Dan Sams, the old emu as I call him, because he looks like an absolute emu. Have a look at the beak, have a look at the head on him, the neck. He's a humanoid emu. Anyway, the emu, he absolutely smashed it after a very, very slow start in the first game, and had a fifer, if you don't mind, largely coming in the final over that he had in the previous game. So that was where a bulk of his score came from. Had some runs that he scored, which were quite nice in the second game against the Sixers. But of course, as I said, that washout prevented him from scoring any more and adding to his tally with the ball. So he scored a 172. Sutherland, 40. Bancroft, a 52. Looked pretty good in the first game. Couldn't really continue on in the second game. Hales, 99, looked really good. Again, one of those players, as I mentioned in the last episode, very much a hit and miss player, but did well enough to score a 99 and actually go up in price. Cooper Connolly, he was my loophole option. So he had the C. Matty Short, he was due for a down game, the absolute messiah. Only scored the 10. Overton did quite well, especially with the bat. 89 he scored. Tom Rogers, I opted to keep him. He only scored a 14, which was pretty disappointing, but it is what it is. Maxwell, a 150, an absolute. He was virtually the one man that won the game for the Stars over the Sixers. Would you believe? An absolute gun. And of course, Sanger with just the 33 there. Then on the bench there, Walter with just the 5. So I was lucky enough to put him on the bench. Of course, they played first up. So, of course, if you do have that possibility of potentially looping a player off the bench and at least seeing how they score, definitely do that. And that's what I did. Steckity, he wasn't selected. So hopefully he is selected this round coming up, considering the Stars have a double. And I kind of stuffed myself up a little bit, I must admit, because I had both McDermott and Steckity, of course, as I just mentioned, not playing in that game that they played against each other. And it actually would have served me well because it meant that had I put the C on one of these guys to lock in Sam's VC score, having seen that he scored quite well first up, because I didn't do that, it meant that I had to settle for Stoinis' score of 12. So I was locked in, didn't have any other options with sort of loopholes. So my only option was potentially swinging a Connolly down into the bowlers, which would have meant that I'd lock in Walter's 5 or I'll lock in Stoinis' 12. So did that. Other thing was I actually had Richardson there. So you won't see the changes here that I made, but you would have seen in the previous episode the trades that I made. I stuck with them, and the only additional trade that I made, which was at the expense of a boost, unfortunately, was when Richardson wasn't named for the Renegades. So ended up using that boost to bring Darcy Short back into my team, coming out of his bye. So he's still that same price point as when I traded him out 2 weeks prior, or 2 rounds prior, I should say. And he came in and scored a 65 and actually went up 21.3k. So was a pretty good boost in the end, considering that I've saved that amount of money. Otherwise, I would have had to have paid as you can see there, an extra 21.3k if I was to try and bring him in this week, or at least over the coming weeks. His break even now is a -30, so I'd almost have to bring him in this week if I didn't have him, just to save on that coin. So pretty fortunate there. A bit of a blessing in disguise with Richo being out, of course. Wasn't ideal because I didn't really want to use the boost this early. I was keen to sort of use them round 6, round 7 potentially, with the amount of doubles that are coming up. But as I said, it was kind of a bit of a happy medium. So that's how my team went. Let's have a look at round 5, and we'll just flick across here. You can't see this on the screen here, but it's just me looking at the fixture. And so the Stars obviously have the double this week. In terms of those guys I traded in, of course, if you didn't see the previous episode, it was Bancroft, Sams, and Hales. Sanger I already had on the bench, so opted for the 4 Thunder players. A lot of people went 3 or 4. This week as well, looking forward, as I always mention, you've got to look, before you make your trades for this week, look at how it's going to impact your coming weeks. And just looking to round 6, and both the Thunder and the Stars have a combined bye in round 6, which is, of course, next round after this round coming, where the Stars have a double. So you don't want to be left with, or overloading yourself with, too many Stars in this round, especially if you're looking to keep, at least 2, if not 3 Thunder players. If I was to keep the 3 Thunder players, and I don't make any more trades as it is at the moment, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 Thunder players, 5, including Maxwell, 6, Steckity, 7, Stoinis. So that's already, before I've made any trades, 7 players are going to be on a bye in round 6. So I'm going to really have to think hard about who I bring in. Of course, with the 3 Stars that I've already got, and hopefully Steckity can come back into the team. And if he is named, I might even just think of running with potentially 4 Stars. The big one, of course, if I scroll down here, you'll see Webster, who is the most traded in player. It does come with a bit of a caveat because, as you can see here, his break-even is quite high, considering he scored a 0 on the weekend, or at least in round 5, I should say. So his break-even is very high. Even though he's on a double, chances of him scoring that break-even pretty low. I know he already did that in one game, as we saw when he had that forfer, and was the highest scorer with the bat for the Stars the other round. Chances of him doing likewise are pretty slim, so you'd probably bank on him losing a bit of cash. So keep that in mind, because again, thinking towards the coming weeks, in round 6, of course, the Scorchers have a double, so you're going to want to have to load up on the likes of, Richo, Berendorf, Ty, Inglis, Hardy. Those are 5 sort of the main guys you'd want to look at very, very closely. And as you can see here, people are starting to bring Inglis in relatively early before the Scorchers double, even though the Scorchers are on a bye this coming round in round 5. So keep that in mind. That's kind of the reason why I'm thinking of potentially using my last boost, my second boost, to bring in 4 Scorchers in round 6, but my one consideration is potentially bringing in a Scorcher early, so I at least have access to 4 via a trade, 3 trades plus the boost next week, and then an extra Scorcher as well if I bring one in heading into round 5. But that's something to consider. What I'm thinking of doing right now is, in terms of trade outs, I would love to keep both, I guess, Bancroft and Philippi. The one thing I'm looking at in round 5 is looking at the forecast. At this stage, I can say that the Brisbane Sixers game, which is happening at the Gabba on the 1st of the 1st, of course, New Year's Day, that's looking like it might be a washout. So for any people that have Heat players, especially on field, as well as Sixers players at this stage, and as we know with the partial washout in the Thunder Sixers game, it's going to be a real kick in the teeth for the Sixers again if they're impacted. But that's part of the reason why I'm thinking of potentially moving on Philippi. Would love to keep Bancroft, but also by the same token, am mindful of potentially moving him on because I don't want to be left with him on the Thunder's bye for next week, and I don't know if I'll be able to hold him, but I'd much prefer to have Bancroft if Philippi is in a game that's going to be washed out. So that's something I'm kind of weighing up and need to work out. Alex Hales, I was thinking of moving on, and still might, but it really probably comes down to how Darcy Short performs. And yeah, a lot of this stuff is kind of weighing upon, if I use a loophole, say with Connolly, for example, leave Darcy Short on the bench and have him as the emergency. If he absolutely kills it in the first game, I obviously have to keep Connolly there. And, I have to think about potentially, I was maybe thinking of doing something sneaky and having Stoinis on the bench, but maybe I can't afford to do that. So holding Hales, even if he's on the bench, is kind of a bit of a, null and void type scenario. So I would need to move him on anyway and don't want to be kept with him for next week. So other guys I'm thinking of moving on. I'm very conscious of this video not going over time because there's so many things running through my mind and so many things I want to try out. But yeah, obviously, as you can see here, with the Stars double, I'm not getting rid of Stoinis as much as I'd probably like to because he is quite out of form. But the fact that he's rolling the arm over, he's getting an over or two, is pleasing. So there is a bit of an elevated ceiling for him, even though he's not in the best form, especially with the bat. If he is taking a sneaky wicket here or there, that does definitely help him. But obviously, just going back to that point, I'm not trading out Stoinis, not trading out Maxwell, not trading out Steckity. So those are the three guys that are non-negotiables. If Steckity isn't named for the first game, I think I'll probably just keep him anyway. But there's opportunity there for me to move him on early. He might even, if he doesn't play at the first game, maybe play the second game. His break even is 104, so there's probably, I guess, there's reason enough to move him on because there's a chance that he'll lose cash if he only plays one of those two games. So I'll have to factor that in potentially if he isn't selected. But outside of those guys that I'm definitely keeping, I'm going to be thinking about moving on Sutherland. I would like to keep Sutho, but I think at this stage, I'm at the stage of the season now where I've got to kind of move on the guys that are at sort of the higher price point to capitalise on, bringing in and I guess banking a bit of cash by sideways trades and sideways moves to really afford, especially those Scorchers players, which if I'm just having a quick look across here as notes that I've got, the likes of Jai Richo, is 170k, Hardy's 207k, Berendorf's 202k, and Ty is 151k. So that's a combined total of around about 730k, if I've done my sums correctly, loosely. So I'm going to have to make sure I've got that, I guess those players at that combined price point to move them on for those guys that I'm prioritising. Inglis is another one as well that I'm thinking about, as I said earlier. He is worth, let me just have a quick look here, 133,600. I guess the beauty of the Scorchers being on the buy now is it means that their prices aren't going to fluctuate. And even the guys that have a low break even, which I think Berendorf would, 31, I think a lot of them do. Hardy, he went up a whole heap in price. He's a negative 23. So these guys here, you don't necessarily need to bring in early unless it helps you with loopholing and such. So that's another factor to kind of think about for this round heading into the Scorchers double. Bringing in an extra Scorcher might mean that you can potentially loop multiple times across the field. So if you have Connolly in your bats, for example, you could loop on a Darcy Short who plays first up against the Stars. Likewise, if you've got, say, a tie in your bowlers and you wanted to put the emergency, if you wanted to be a sneaky and put the emergency on Steckity, for example, or maybe even Sanger. Let's just say, for example, Steckity's playing, he's been named. So like Sanger, for example, plays a second game and you can have tie down here. If I trade Rogers to tie, for example, I could then loop on Sanger's score if he absolutely smashes it. Or, if he doesn't, potentially put Walter on instead of Ty, and so on and so forth. So there's so many different layers to this round, more so than any other round, I think. So when it comes to tactics and being strategic about the remainder of the season, we're at round 5, we're virtually at the halfway point of the season. with only 9 rounds in the BBL season for this year, or 2023, 2024. So yeah, it's all different factors to think about, but loosely, just so you know, you can see visually as to what I'm thinking about. And of course, this is no doubt going to change, because you can already tell so many things that I've run through already, that there's a few things I need to sort of work through and work out what the best course of action is, even to the point where I might even do some trades, and I might even bring in, use one of my trades to bring in a scorcher. And if a player that's, I've tried to loophole off the bench doesn't score well, maybe then I will forego getting that extra scorcher in, and I might bring on someone else that's going to play this week. So again, so many things that I have to think about and work through. But for the sake of this video, let's just have a look at some of the guys that I'd be looking to move on. And I think, as I said, Sutho and Rogers just being at that higher price point. Funnily enough, they're actually at the exact same price point, would you believe? But both of these guys here I'll look to move on. As I mentioned, Webster is definitely one that I'm thinking about getting into my team. Despite that high price point, high price point, but also the high break even that he's got, chances are that he's going to drop in price heading into round 6. So hopefully the SuperCoach guys and Webster are kind to us, and he doesn't drop too much in price, especially for those of us holding out and sort of penny pinching to bring in the likes of those guys that I ran through from the scorchers in Berendorf, Ty, Hardy, and Richo. So really need to think about all of that. But Webster is definitely one that I'm thinking about getting in. I didn't have him for the Stars double the other round, and it absolutely hurt me. He's still in 16.5% of teams. I don't know how many of those were existing owners and kept him, or if it was a high ownership and people traded him out. But I'm sure some would have. I think he's kind of the sort of person that you want to have in your team. I know there's questions there about, because he only bowled, 1 over in his previous game, that had a lot to do with Maxi now, because he's back to full fitness. He bowled the full 4 overs, and the pitch that they were bowling on was very spin friendly. So the likes of him and the other spinners as well, they were being prioritised over the pace bowlers. So hence the reason why Webster didn't bowl as much. And of course he got smashed in his first over, much like Stoinis did. So both of those guys only bowled the 1 over. But I think depending on where they're playing, and if it is pace friendly, there is a chance that Webster may get the extended overs. The other thing to think about is Harris Routh. He has finished, his stint in the BBL is finished now. And likewise, the other Pakistan bowler, figured his name. Let's see if I can find him here. He is... Sorry, his name escapes me. Not Wasim. Has he been taken out? Mir, Usama Mir. He's finished up as well. So both of those guys, if you're thinking about trading them in, don't do it, because they're finished up now in the BBL. Both of those guys have gone back to their home country to play for their national team. So both of those guys will be out. So it means that there's, 8 overs to go around, with both those guys being gone. I think Steketee, hopefully, I'm crossing my fingers that he comes back into the team. That's potentially one guy that has 3 to 4 overs, and sort of reclaims that death over role that he's historically had, and especially when he was at Brisbane Heat. Harris Routh did have that death overs role, but without him being there, I think Steketee should step into that role to some extent, if not to the full extent. And then, of course, there's 4 overs to go around. So, we're looking at the likes of, if Maxi continues bowling 4, which he probably should, Stoinis should maybe get 2 of those overs, and at the very minimum I think Webster should get 2 of those overs as well. But there's also I think they've signed a recent international player as well who can roll the arm over. So that's the other thing to think of in terms of that. So yeah, we're just hopeful anyway. And I think Webster's the sort of guy that you can't fade, and I know that full well, not having him in my team the other round when he absolutely smashed it. And when the back-to-back champ, Andrew, had him as his sneaky VC. But of course, he's the first guy that I'm looking at bringing in. The other guy I'm thinking of bringing in potentially is the other bowler / batter, Ahmad Wasim. He's looked pretty good, thereabouts anyway. He's kind of passed the test, the eye test anyway. Took a wicket in his previous game. And economy rate bonus as well, which is also handy. 8 dot balls and a catch. So he's probably not a must-have. So I'm still 50-50 on him. So I might leave him out at this stage. Outside of that, I would probably be bringing in potentially an Inglis or a tie. So if I was to... let's just say for the example here, then I'm going to potentially bring in Inglis. Leaves me 29.5k. And I've probably got enough to bring in Wasim. And I'll need to work out who I can loop as well. As I said, Philippi in that game, which might be a washout against the Heat. I think it's probably safer for me to get rid of him and have to hold Bancroft. And again, I'm going to have to work out if I can get in an extra stars player in the form of Wasim, or again, do I bring in another Scorcher early, which sounds silly, but it means that, if it's a matter of bringing in an extra stars player this week or an extra Scorchers player next week, I think when push comes to shove, I'd much prefer to have that Scorchers player in my team, from arguably the most informed team in the Scorchers, compared to the Stars, who have been struggling and they only just got their first win. So if I can afford to get a Wasim in, yeah, maybe. But, why not? Why not think about bringing in another Scorcher? So, I might potentially do this. I can afford to bring in an Andrew Ty, for example. Means that, as I said, I can bring in... that'll give me 1, 2, 3, and then if I use 3 plus a boost next week, 4, it'll be 7 Scorchers potentially I'd have, plus the Matt Short, Overton, and Darcy Short. So what's that? 10 players? 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, that's 10. 7 Scorchers and 3 strikers. So I don't mind that as an option as well. Again, it's foregoing this week. Probably a little bit of a risk, especially in head-to-head games. But it probably helps that I've got an extra stars player there in the form of Steckity, when a lot of people wouldn't. But again, that's pending upon Steckity actually playing. So... yeah. And I'm just worried about having too many stars, too many thunder. That's going to have me in a bit of a pickle for next week. So say, for example, I'm going to have Andrew Ty in. So it looks probably a little bit silly at this stage, but let's just roll with this. And obviously we're going to be putting Hales on. Darcy Short. What I could do here is if McDermott plays, I could always put McDermott there. If Darcy Short plays well, I just keep everything as is. Don't worry about the captaincy at the moment. Let's just put it on, put the vice on Maxi, and we'll put the C just for now on Sam's. On Short we should be doing. Don't be stupid. The Messiah. So, yeah, what I could do is put Inglis there. Connolly stays on field if Darcy Short kills it. If he doesn't, then there's a few sort of options I could take here where I could put McDermott straight on field, and that's pretty much that. Moving down to the bowlers, what I could be doing as well is... where are we? So Ty, obviously, on the bye. So Sanger, he kind of plays that off the bench loophole option. If Sanger kills it, leave Ty on. If not, there's a little bit of a worry here because of the fact that Walter, again, with the Heat, as I mentioned, in that Sixers game, might be a washout. And if it is, it could mean that I'm potentially eyeing off a bit of a a bit of a zero here. So that's the risk I'd be taking. But either way, I've got Sanger there. So I'm not going to be swallowing a zero as such, unless Sanger just stinks it up, but knock on wood, he doesn't. What I can also do as well, because I've got that boost up my sleeve, I could also undo trades up until... so where are we? Yeah, what I could do potentially is for that last game, because there is word as well that the Stars and Renegades game, which is at the MCG, could be rain affected, but not to the extent of Brisbane and Sixers, which is at this stage looking like it's more of a washout or reduced overs game at minimum, whereas the Stars and Renegades might be rain impact to some extent, but not confirmed. Again, we need to wait until we get sort of the day before that game. But what I could also do is, because I've got these Renegades players that I've traded out, it's not going to show me the trades now, is it? It's gone kaput. What I could virtually do is just here we go. So what I could do is undo the trade of Tide of Rogers and bring, or Sutherland, for example, and bring him back in. Not ideal really, because I'd much prefer to bring in a Scorchers player. Yeah, and I kind of would leave me a Scorchers player down. And yeah, pretty much a waste of a trade virtually. So I don't really like that idea either, but that's kind of only, I'd be only doing that if Sanger doesn't score well. But yeah, I think at this stage I'll be, bringing in, where are we? So I think at this stage is non-negotiable. Webster's coming in. I think at least one of these 3 trades will be a Scorchers player. And my other option that I was thinking of doing potentially is reserving one of these trades to bring in a Hurricanes player, who of course have their double coming up in round 7. So it's kind of, 2 rounds before I need to kind of do it. Hence the reason why I'm kind of prioritising the Scorchers ahead of the, of the Hurricanes and all those other teams, the Heat, and so on and so forth, that have the double coming up after the Scorchers. But, okay, so for example, I was going to do this. Actually, no. Let's reverse this. Let's reverse update trade. So for example, we weren't going to bring Ty in, but we were going to bring in an extra Stars player in the form of Wasim. Where are we? So we'll go with that. Complete the trade. Okay, and for this round, it'll give me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Stars players, which I think is probably a bit too much. Round 5 and round 6 is very eerily similar to round 1 and round 2, when people were loading up on Heat players, and round 3 when they were loading up on Heat players and Strikers players, and then both of those teams had a bye at the exact same time. And a lot of people, not a lot, but there were quite a few people that I saw run into trouble because they had a heap of Strikers players and a heap of Heat players, given the Heat started with the triple game in round 1. So we don't want to be running into this similar sort of trouble with having held too many Stars players and too many Thunder players. So already you can see here I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, if we're counting Sanger on the bench, Stars and Thunders players who are going to be on the bye in round 6. So even if I was using 3 trades and a boost, so say for example I was trading out Sams, Bancroft, Webster, and say Wasim, I'd still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players on the bye in terms of Sanger, Steckity, Maxwell, Stoinis, and Hales. So Darcy Short would come on. Inglis would come on. Connolly would come on. Who else is there? So Maxwell will have to go off for Walter. Yeah, there's no way for me to do it. So I think I'd be running into trouble if I was trying to get Wasim in my team. Unfortunately, I'd need to trade Sam's, Webster, Wasim, and potentially Steketee, but I don't know if all those guys would afford me the Scorchers that I'm after. Hence the reason why it's probably safer to start with less stars player in round 5. Gee whiz, it's an absolute head proverbial. I won't get the video flagged, but from YouTube's censorship. The other option I can do, if I have Inglis, is if McDermott plays, and hopefully he kills it, I could then definitely keep Inglis here, loop him on. That's another option as well for round 5 if I wanted to do that. And it probably means that in this case, if that was to happen, there's reason for me to have potentially another Scorchers player here to loop on, say, a Sanger for round 5. That's what I'm talking about, sorry. Hopefully this hasn't been a complete, cluster proverbial. But there's so many things, as you can see here, that you kind of need to plan out going from round 5 to round 6, because you can be caught out. And I almost did, because I completely forgot that these Stars had their bye round shared with the Thunder in round 6. So that's pretty much what my thoughts are, as jumbled up as they are. Hopefully there's some cohesiveness to that, and you can kind of follow along as to what my thoughts were. But apologies if it is convoluted. But again, you kind of need to be working out and planning across 2 rounds, knowing that the Scorchers double, back-to-back double, if you don't mind, is coming up round 6 and round 7. And then also the fact that the Stars and the Thunder have their bye in round 6, the very next round. So don't overload on the Stars and hold too many Thunder players, because you're going to be up the absolute shitter. The other option I can be going down is potentially just getting rid of a Bancroft or a Hales, and it means that I'm stuck with one less Thunder player that I need to trade out heading into round 6 when they're on the bye. So that's pretty much where I'm at the moment. That's kind of, let me just undo the changes here back to the way it was. But as you can see there, I think Webster's 100% coming in. Just to summarise, of course, Inglis I think is probably 75-25 coming in. And the last trade is, I don't think I'm going to be going for another Stars player, just because I've got enough as it is. Excuse me. The thought is potentially going for a Hurricanes player or a Scorchers player early, just so I've capitalised on potentially loops. And again, it's dependent upon how players perform in those games that are playing early, that I can also bench and potentially loop scores on from off the bench. So let's just undo everything and go back to the way things were. If I was to go for a VC and a C, I think it goes without saying, Maxwell, we all saw what he can do even when he's not at full fitness, but especially when he's back to full fitness, taking wickets, bowling 4 overs, and then with the bat, winning games off his own bat, really, for the Stars. So you'd be silly to fade him. So definitely put the VC on him. If he somehow fails, and I think he'd have to fail drastically for me to not want to put the C on him, and again, probably comes down to the weather for the second Stars game up against the Renegades at the MCG. If it does look a little bit dicey, maybe you could put it on another player. But you'd need to do it for the second game between the Hurricanes and the Thunder. Yeah, unfortunately, sorry, I didn't even realise, but the strikers play first against the Stars, so you can't even use Matty Short as the backup C option. So I think the backup C option for me would probably be Daniel Sams, the Emu, the humanoid Emu. And that's pretty much it. Hopefully there's some sort of logic behind that you can see and follow along as to what my pattern of thought was. But we'll end the video here. If you do have any comments and questions, feel free to flip them down below. Happy to help, of course. But you can hit us up on Twitter as well, supercoach_edge, and of course on Facebook, Instagram, everything else as well. But just to hit us up, for timeliness sake, hit us up on Twitter or below in the comment section below this video after you've watched it. So with that, we'll check in yet again at the conclusion of round 5, which is at this case, I think it's on the 2nd. So it's on Tuesday, the 2nd of 2024, a new year. Wow, that's gone very, very quick. But thanks again for tuning in. And if you have any questions, as I said, leave them below. But until next time, we'll catch you in the next episode. And we hope you had an awesome round coming out of round 4. We'll catch you next time. Cheers.